and I failed to give you the question this morning. The question, last time I asked you, how do you define trust, right? That's what I asked you last week. And I know that was eons of the other stuff. And, today I want you to think about one person that you highly trust. You can think about a person that highly trust, and maybe think about what makes them trustworthy to you. What makes them trustworthy? We've whittled down the scriptures, the numbers that we're reading, and I'm just reading this is the Old Testament passage from the lectionary. Interesting. It's interesting. It's sort of taken out of the blue a little bit, and I can see how it fits with the psalm that Rick just read, and but it's all of a sudden we're given a passage from Genesis, and so we're not reading we're not reading doing a series from the Old Testament, but we're giving this passage from Genesis. And it's Genesis 45, verses 3 through 11, and then verse 15. And which is on page 42 in the Newer Testament section of the Bible, of your Pew Bible, if you'd like to read along. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him. So dismayed were they at his presence. And Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." And they came closer. He said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. God sent me here. He sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years. There are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to the Pharaoh, and Lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen. You shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, as well as your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have will not come to poverty.' And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them, and after that his brothers talked with him." Do you know the story that leads up to it? To the one I just read? Some of you may remember it very clearly. I have found that some of the old stories that many of us heard as children we have forgotten. We've sort of forgotten the details. And then sometimes I make an assumption, because you're so faithful, I would make an assumption that, that you were raised on these Bible stories, And I realized, some of you haven't heard the story at all. And so I'm going to tell you the story. It's a little long, so I'm going to try to do it quickly. It's really odd. The story of Joseph takes up a really large chunk of the book of Genesis, and it's intriguing to me. Now, Joseph was the favorite son of Jacob, the grandson of Abraham, and Jacob was a tribal leader. Now Jacob had 2 wives. That seems a little strange, doesn't it? And in fact, it seems a little bit impossible. One wife was named Leah, and his other wife was named Rachel. Now I won't take the time to tell you the story of how Jacob ended up with 2 wives, but that's another one. That's another one of those Old Testament stories that was told to me as a child, and I always thought was quite interesting. But he had a favorite wife, and his favorite wife was Rachel. He had 10 sons by Leah and 2 sons by Rachel. His 2 sons that he had by Rachel were named Joseph and Benjamin, and they were the youngest. And so Jacob's partiality toward Rachel spilled over onto his sons. And so he did not treat all of his 12 sons equally. Now, I am sorry, there is no mention of daughters. Because it's the Old Testament. They're a little better in the first, the writers get a little better in the New Testament, but they're Old Testament, so we can make up our own stories about the daughters, but so he had this partiality toward Joseph, and the partiality spilled over into family life. The 10 other brothers, the sons of Leah, would go to work every day. They were herdsmen. They probably were also, they raised grain, and they would go to work every day. And the workforce in those days was primarily made up of family. And but Joseph was more like his dad's gopher. He would send him out to take messages to the guys that were working. And on his 17th birthday, Joseph was given this coat, that was bright colored, long sleeves, not the kind of thing one would work in. But Joseph would wear his coat, which so distinguished himself from his brothers, who were out there sweating in the fields, lugging sheep around on their shoulders and feeding the sheep and herding them to the next plot of green grass. And along would come Joseph in his not made for work coat, and he would be and with a message maybe from the Father. Joseph was also just a little bit insensitive. He was a dreamer. And he was an interpreter, and later we find out he was an interpreter of dreams. And so God gave Joseph these dreams, and one of the dreams was that he and his brothers were harvesting grain, and they were tying sheaves. That's the straw, pulling the straw together and wrapping it and binding it. And the sheaves of that were in front of the brothers all bowed down to Joseph's sheaves. Well, they really liked hearing that dream, don't you think? And then he had another dream where he was there, and there was the sun and the moon and stars, and the sun and the moon and the stars all bowed down to him. And he told this one to his dad, and he says, "Are you saying that your dad and your mom and all your brothers are going to be bowing down to you?" And Joseph was, and the dad was upset with it. So maybe it was a hot day. I don't know all of the circumstances, but the brothers had had it up to here. And so as they saw Joseph coming, they said, let's just kill him. Let's just get rid of him. So the 10 brothers were becoming a mob. And so Joseph came, and and Reuben, the older brother, who maybe was not a part of the original discussion, he said to the brothers, let's not kill him. That's not a good idea, guys. He was the oldest, and he was trying to hold things together. He said, let's just throw him into the pit. There were pits there. I think they were like cisterns that collected water, but there was no water in this one. It was a dry pit. Let's just throw him into the pit. Let's not kill him. And Reuben's thinking, later, I will come back and I will rescue him out of the pit. I'll take, so that we won't let him die. And so they throw him into the pit. Reuben goes about his day, planning to come back at the end of the day and rescue Joseph. The other brothers decide, we won't kill him, his blood, don't really want his blood on our hands. Let's sell him. There was a caravan coming by, Midianites, traders, and so they sold their brother to the Midianite traders and they sold him into slavery. They profited. So then when Reuben came along at night planning to take him home, he was gone. So the brothers said, oh, what can we do? So they went back to their original plan. They took it, they had kept his coat, the one that was easily identified as his. They tore it into shreds, and they put goat's blood on it. And they went home and they told the father that they had found his cloak and that he had been eaten, that they assumed that Joseph had been eaten by a wild animal. We don't have any pictures of the sorrow that occurred in the home. We don't have any pictures in the Bible of what the guilt might have done to the brothers. But Joseph was on his way to Egypt. I would say that in that family, the trust level between the brothers, the 10 brothers, and Joseph was not very high. Would you think that? And I think that, the 10 brothers looking at Joseph and what he brought to every situation, they did not have much confidence in him. And so at this juncture in the story, we have brothers who are feeling guilty because they left, because they sold their brother, and we have the brother going into Egypt. In Egypt, Joseph is bought by a man named Potiphar, who is an important person in the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh is like the king of Egypt. And so Potiphar buys Joseph and really very quickly recognizes that Joseph has some unique qualities. One is he's a good organizer. And the other is that he can be trustworthy. That he's trustworthy. He does what he says. High integrity. So Potiphar makes him the steward of his house. And so in a very short time, Joseph rises from being a slave in a pit, or a brother is thrown in the pit, sold into slavery, to being an important servant in this man's house. Things are moving along very well. The house is going well until Potiphar's wife lies about Joseph and accuses him of attacking her. Okay. Actually, she refused him. He refused her because of his loyalty to Potiphar and just his ethics. And so he refused her. So she had him arrested. Potiphar threw him in jail where he stayed for about 2 years. In jail, he ran into these two guys. One was the baker, and one was the king's cupbearer, that had lost favor with the Pharaoh. And so they were in jail, and so Joseph became friends with them. Not only did he become friends with them, but Joseph also, again, rose to the top. The chief jailer recognized again that Joseph had abilities to govern, to take care of, to control, to manage. And so he became like a trustee. That's what they call in Mississippi. They call it, trustee is a prisoner that's been given some authority to guard other prisoners. And so Joseph was given authority over other prisoners. So again, he sort of, within that context of jail, he rose to the top. And so these two guys that were in prison were had these dreams, and they told Joseph the dreams, and Joseph told them what was going to happen. And it did. It happened as Joseph said. One man was executed. The other man went back to work for the Pharaoh. Joseph said, "Be sure to tell the Pharaoh that I have this ability." And so, but the man forgot, as one would after being out of jail. Until the Pharaoh had troubling dreams. So the Pharaoh had troubling dreams, and he couldn't find anyone that could interpret the dreams. And the steward, the man who had been his cupbearer for the Pharaoh, said, "Oh, I met a guy in jail who has an ability to interpret dreams." And so, and he told him how the dreams that they had in jail came true. And so the Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he told him two dreams that he had. One was that there were seven very sleek, fat cows who are walking along, and then there were seven lean cows who came along behind them and ate them. And then there was a similar dream. There were ears of grain that were plump and ripe and just ripe. And then there were these ears of grain that were dried and shriveled, and they came along and ate up the grain. And it's almost like Joseph said, "Oh, this is cinchy. This is easy peasy." You know, I know that. I know what both dreams say the same thing. There are going to be 7 years. There are going to be 7 years of prosperity, good harvest. And then there are going to be 7 years of famine. Pharaoh believes him and says, "What should we do about it?" Joseph says, "Store up during the good years, and you'll be okay in the famine years." Pharaoh thinking, "Who can I get to do this?" Now, he may have checked Joseph's resume, and seen that he had been, except for the encounter with Potiphar's wife, he had a good experience as Potiphar's servant. Maybe he checked with the jailer. We don't know. This is not in here. He may have gone to one of these services that, the internet now. There's somebody there advertising that they can match up. But anyway, he chose. He said, "You're the person. You're the person I need to run this program." And so Joseph was made the administrator of this program that was designed to save the people. Very soon he saw he was successful. He prospered. He prospered in that role. They had 7 years of great. They had 7 years of great crops, and he stored a portion of each year, a portion, and they were overflowing. They even quit counting how much they had because they had so much. And then when the years of famine came, Egypt was plush. They had all they needed. They had so much that the lands around that were being affected that were affected also by the famine, people from those lands came to get food. So Joseph somehow became trustworthy, didn't he? It was all along in the story, after he left his brothers, there was this trustworthiness that radiated out. And people picked up on that. And they gave him responsibility. What does it mean to be trustworthy? I've been reading a book by Stephen M.R. Covey. I mentioned it last week, and I really think it's a great book for some of us, more of you to read, because we're in a time when we're learning how to trust. Covey says, simply put, trust means confidence. The opposite of trust is distrust, is suspicion. When you trust people, you have confidence in them, in their integrity and in their abilities. When you distrust people, you are suspicious of them, of their integrity, their agenda, their capabilities, or their track record. It's that simple. We have all had experiences that validate the difference between relationships that are built on trust and those that are not. These experiences clearly tell us the difference is not small, it is dramatic. In the story, the passage that I read today, the Bible reading that we did, we see a reconciliation and an affirmation of God. And Joseph is basically saying, we can trust God. We can trust God. And in our music today, a lot of the Psalms have been about trusting God. And last week I talked about that. How do we develop our trust for God? And so Joseph, in this passage we read, he's saying his brothers came looking for grain, thinking that Joseph was who knows where. They didn't know where he was. They had no idea he was in Egypt. They certainly didn't think he was a person with authority. And so they came and looking for grain, and after 30 years, Joseph recognized them. He said, they're my brothers. Joseph, of course, did not look like he looked 30 years ago. Probably looked dressed like an Egyptian. He spoke probably fluently spoke Egyptian. And so here came his brothers in, speaking Hebrew, attempting to get to buy grain for the family that's starving back in their homeland. And so Joseph tests them. He doesn't trust them. He doesn't trust that they've changed. And so he puts some tests before them. And he sort of plays with them. So first of all, he says, you didn't come here for grain. You came here as your spies. You came here to find out where our weaknesses are. The nakedness of our land, it says in Scripture. You say you're coming for food, but I know. And they said, oh no, we're not spies. We're not spies. Joseph said, you're spies. And he throws them in jail for 3 days. And I don't know if he snickered behind their back. But he did cry a lot too. And so then So then he says, they're saying, we're not spies, and they said, and so he said, okay, if you're not spies, prove it. I want you to bring me and they'd already told him about their family. They want you to bring me your younger brother. What was his name? Benjamin? Is that his name? Bring him. And that will prove to me that you're not spies. And they're thinking, yeah, we can do that, and once we're out of here, we're out of here. And he said, but one of you've got to stay here. So he kept one brother there, sent the others away. They got back home, and then Joseph did another thing. The money that they had used to pay for the grain, he put it back in their sacks. Okay, so here these guys are. When they get home, they open the sacks, and the money that they took to pay for the sacks, pay for the grain, is in the sack with the grain. And so they're very confused and frightened because they have said, we're not spies, we came to buy grain, but they actually didn't buy any grain. They didn't pay for it. And so it's sort of so they don't really know what to do. So they tell their dad, and then they just sort of live off the grain that they brought back. I don't know what they were thinking about their poor guy, about their poor brother back in jail, but they run out of food again. And so they say, okay, well, you've got to go back to Egypt and buy more food. And they're saying, well, if we go back, we've got to take Benjamin with us. And the dad says, I've already lost one son. I'm not going to give you Benjamin. You take it back. Reuben says, I promise you, I will take care of him. And they really had no choice. They wanted to live. So these brothers went back to get more grain. They got there, and Joseph sees his brother Benjamin, and he weeps, not in front of him. And so he plays with them again. This time, he takes an expensive cup. He fills the bags with grain, puts the money back in again, and he also puts a cup from that belonged to him in Benjamin's bag. So they start to leave, and Joseph says, wait, somebody stole my cup. They search the cup, they search the bags, and there it is in Benjamin's bag. So he says, okay, he has to stay. He has to stay, and you go back. In the end, Joseph comes forth and says, I'm Joseph. And he says, that thing that you thought you were doing to harm me, God has made it something good. We can trust God. I want to just say a word, though, about what does it mean to trust ourselves. Covey says that that there are several waves of trust that's involved in just about every process. And the first one is self-trust. And how do I trust myself, and how can I also increase my trustworthiness to you or to other people? When I was in my 8th year as a campus minister at the University of Arkansas, and we had a very strong program at Arkansas. I was at Glorieta, New Mexico at a conference. It was a summer conference, and the director of campus ministry from Mississippi came up to me and asked me, would I consider going to Mississippi State to work? Now you might think, depending on how you have school ranked in your head, that going from Arkansas to Mississippi State might be a step down. Or you might say, both of them. Neither one is too prestigious in our mind. They're not Big Ten. But when it comes to campus ministry, Mississippi State has one of the strongest campus ministries in the country. And so when Jerry Merriman asked me would I consider going to Mississippi State to work, I began kicking that around at this conference. And my feeling was my feeling wasn't that this would not be a good place to go. My feeling was I'm not sure I'm good enough to go there. Have you ever had an opportunity to go someplace and you wondered if you had the qualities and the ability to do what you thought they would be asking of you? And so my self-trust was pretty low. So what I did is I had friends at this conference. There were campus ministers there from all over the country. And so I began talking with them. Do you see in me the abilities needed for this job? And by the end of the week, there were several said, you can do this, you need to do this. And so I left Arkansas where I was the associate campus minister to go to Mississippi State. But my tendency sometimes is not to trust myself. At the core of this pool of trust no lights are on. So, at the heart of becoming of the trust pool is the self-trust. Can I trust myself, and can others trust me? At the core of that self-trust, there are four core emphases. One is integrity. Do I have integrity? Do you have integrity? This deals with the issue of am I honest? The second thing is intent. Is what is my intention? If you're wanting to trust me, then you would want to know what my intentions are regarding whatever it is that we're looking at. The third thing is results. The third thing is actually our capabilities, and the fourth thing is result. Those are four things that would tell you something about my trustworthiness. Now, I want to tell you that I'm not always trustworthy. I want to be, but and I think my intent is generally pretty good. I think I line up. I try real hard to line up with what I say and what I believe in my actions, And then, but sometimes I don't have the capabilities, and so there are certain things that circumstances I might be in, and it would be wise for you not to trust me. For example, if moving tables. Twice I have fallen moving tables. Because physically my left leg doesn't do what I want it to do sometimes. Now I use that and I'm glad you're smiling because it's sort of funny and I'm just sort of honest about it. Okay, so if you're asking me to move tables, I may take on the job, but I'll be calling on Drew or Will over here to get it done. So I don't have that. I I question my capability to do that. There are other jobs, aren't there? There are jobs that, that are put before you or that you have, and if we're honest, we say, I don't know about that. I don't know if I can do it or not. And so, but there may be plenty of other jobs that I can do fine. So it's not just that whether a person is trustworthy, it's trustworthy with a certain thing. Is what we're looking, what we look at at this core, this heart of being self-trusting. So intent, or integrity and intent are about character, and then capable and the results are about others. These are the factors that shape us as we look at ourselves and we look at others. I can tell you a long list of things that I'm not capable of. I can tell you some things that I think I'm very capable of. You might not think that, because your standard for evaluating it might be different. So I guess what I wanted to do in using Joseph as a backdrop, I wanted to say that he, Joseph, whose trustworthiness was seen as very low by his brothers, was able to change that trustworthiness. So whether we are trustworthy in the moment or not, we can grow and become more trustworthy. And there are ways to do that. Now, how do we grow in our ability to trust others? Well, I think it's a lot like trusting God. Last week I told you that if you want to grow in your trust, of God, then one of the things that we need to do is to become more intimate with God. I need to know God better. I know God better by spending time with God. I know God better by prayer, sometimes through scriptures, sometimes through worship, all the different ways that God shows me who God is. And then I also know God because of what the people around me believe and say about God, and how they lay their lives in God's hands. The same is true with trusting others. If you want to increase your trust in others, then you have to get close enough to them to know their hearts, to know their intent, to see if they're integrous, to see if they are capable, and to see if and to take a look at what they've done in the past. Those are things those are at the core of this trustworthiness that I see as important to us in our life together. Amen.